Hello, my friends, and welcome to the reading room. And today we have a proofread. I am interviewing the marvelous, the fantastic, and the unique Grayson from Critical Base Theory. How you doing, mate?
Hey, Mark, I'm very happy to be here. So, I've been a fan of your channel from even before I made my channel. So, I don't think we've done a stream with just the two of us together. So,
No,
I'm excited.
no. No, we've done one with AJ, and I think we kind of met through AJ. I think sort of as the Hoven survivors of debate kind of thing. I think we have a support group for Hoven debate survivors. Just because it's just ridiculous. But the other thing I thought of last night was we've never actually debated together on the same team either. That's something else that we haven't done, which is kind of surprising. We were going to try and line one up on Evolution with Jim Bob, I think, but he's a bit of a waste of time, to be honest with you. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's still something you want to do, but I'm keen. I'm always keen. You know what I'm like. I'll debate anything with anybody. So yeah.
Oh, no, I was trying to think about where we actually first met, and I think it was either through AJ or just by being on the same debate panel, one of those open debate panels, and both of us joining.
Possibly.
I know that we both are, we both love debating and love joining those big open discussions. So it could have been through that. My exact recollection is hazy, but yes, we have
Right.
we have tried in the past to arrange to have a tag team debate, Team Grayson and Mark, or Mark
Yeah.
and Grayson. And I would love to see that happen. I think that you would make for a
Yeah,
great.
same.
So.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, if we could do something on evolution or something on abiogenesis or something like that.
Yeah.
You know way more than I do. Look, I'm just going to use you as a crutch, to be honest with you, Grace, and I'm just going to get you to prop me up because your knowledge on sort of biology and stuff is way better than mine. I'm more than happy, let's be fair. But your background is that you're a biochemist, I believe. Is that biochemistry?
I have an undergraduate degree in biochemistry, and I've worked in a structural biology lab. So I don't necessarily, when I think of myself, I don't really think of myself as a biochemist. But yeah, I guess I have done
Right.
biochemistry in a lab before. So
Well, it's a wide field, right? It is a really wide field because you've got sort of organic chemistry, you've got sort of the more biological, like biology kind of stuff.
yeah.
And it's all kind of related. But so what's your actual sort of specialization then? Where are you coming from as far as, sort of biochem is concerned?
So in college, I kind of had a very I would say general interest or maybe a bit of like ADD in terms of like avoiding niche specializations. Like
Okay.
I worked in a neuroscience lab as well, at the same time as a structural biology lab, because I've always really been interested in the brain.
Mm,
Like neurobiochemistry is also super interesting to me.
yeah.
But then in the structural biology lab that I worked at, it was really cool because it was kind of an intersection of inorganic chemistry and biochemistry, where we were basically analyzing how swapping out the metal atom affects proteins that have like a metal component. So we were looking at like hemoglobin and myoglobin that have the
Right.
iron in our blood.
Yeah.
So we were swapping it out for neighboring elements on the periodic table like cobalt or manganese and seeing
Mm.
how that affects the overall protein structure and function. So it was a really interesting intersection. I don't know if I would necessarily say that that's where my niche would be in terms of specialty. After college, I sort of went more into industry, and
Yeah.
started my own like distributorship for biologics in like spine fusion surgeries. So I know a
Mhm.
lot about like bone fusion, bone healing, and specifically we were using like a small little protein of only like 15 amino acids, like a peptide, for that process. So I know a lot about that kind of niche, from more of the industry side rather than the research side. But still, I mean,
Right.
I had to read a lot of that literature in order to be able to converse with like neurosurgeons about it.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And neuroscience. So I mean, you'd probably know a bit about the sort of chemical interactions that go on in our brain, and that that particularly has been coming up recently, where or I don't know about you, but I've been certainly running into a lot of um, sort of idealists, people that think they're or mind body dualists,
Hmm.
and I wondered what is your like, what would you say to somebody like that who's like, well, we have these emotions, we have these thoughts, it has to be something else other than the brain.
Yeah, because I've engaged with a lot of those people as well. Like I'll frequent like the consciousness subreddit, and it's full of people making like mind body dualism, idealist,
Yeah.
panpsychist kind of arguments.
Right.
It just all sounds like a bunch of like woo to me. Like I really can't make heads or tails of it, because to me, just based on my understanding of how the brain works and how neurochemistry works, it seems pretty clear that consciousness is an activity that the brain does. It's an actual
Mhm.
process that is ongoing in the brain. And even in my own experience, in meditation and like introspective of like trying to figure out what exactly it's like to be conscious, has
Right.
also gone that way of like looking at the actual process as it's unfolding. It seems to me that it's a process in the brain that has to do
Mm.
with sensation, perception, awareness. Um, and yeah, even with my studies of like some Eastern philosophical subjects, like Buddhism in particular, has always been pretty clear about the self being an illusion, not existing. It seems
Yes.
like the Buddhists figured this out long before neuroscience, just from deep levels of introspection. And now it seems like neuroscience is catching up and figuring out sort of some of the illusory nature of things like free will or consciousness. Um, that I think that we're sort of, while we don't have a fully scientific theory of the mind at the
Mm.
moment, I am cautiously optimistic that in my lifetime, or maybe in the next 100, 150 years, that such a model will be developed to where we can have an understanding of what is actually going on with like subjective experience and the experience of qualia and conscious awareness on an actual molecular level of detail.
So, just people out there, just take them through what qualia is as opposed to sort of phenomena. See.
Yeah, so qualia would be sort of the subjective experience of, I mean, oftentimes people will talk about like the experience of seeing the color red or something, like as a way of differentiating between qualia and the alternative. So, like the common example is that you have Mary, she's alone in a room. She is a scientist, a researcher. She knows everything about the color red from a scientific perspective. But in her room, everything is black and white. She has never actually seen anything that is the color red. And so
Right.
people make this argument that she can know every single detail of, in terms of the scientific information, everything that can be known about the color red. She can know its
Mhm.
wavelength. She can know exactly what it lights up in the brain when you see something red. She can know every single
Yep.
detail about it, but she's still missing something. She still doesn't know what red looks like, because
Right.
that is a qualia. It's a subjective experience that she actually needs to experience in order to gain that extra little bit of information. So typically, that such an argument will be used as a way of saying, well, look, it can't just all be physical, because she knows all the physical information and she's still missing something extra. And so I will typically
And
hear
this, yeah,
arguments
the
like that.
same could be applied to ultraviolet for us, for instance. But
Yeah.
we've developed tools that we can then see ultraviolet, which I think that any experience, like any description or experience we have, will never be 100% accurate to reality because it relies on senses that, while accurate, they're kind of flawed a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, so um, I think that's really interesting, and the whole idea of qualia is that like, how do you tell if two people's experiences are the same? Like, how do I know if I look at red that Grayson's seeing the same thing? Because we've got no real way to test. Like, we can test, like you say, its wavelength. We can test all kinds of things, but we can't actually test what I experience as opposed to you.
Yeah, and I think that such a thing, at least theoretically, is not outside of the realms of possibility. Like you could, if you had a sufficient level of detail as to looking what's going on in my brain, you could reconstruct what my actual qualia is like, or you
Mm,
could. So, for instance, my thinking about the whole Mary's room situation is
yeah,
that it's more so a limit of language than it is a limit of like that the something that's being missed is not a limit of physicalism, because we can send Mary a physical message that will explain to her exactly what the color red is. It just needs to be in a form of electrical stimulation of her brain. You can, through the right information, it just is not linguistic information, but it's still physical
right.
information that can be imparted to her, that can give her the experience, the qualia of what red is. In
Mm,
my reading, it's more so just a limitation on language, less so on limitation on like the physical nature of these experiences. Um, and yeah, I mean, through meditation and everything, I've sort of, the understanding that I've come to about what exactly consciousness is. For a while, considered it like the awareness of like a happening, and that happening, like the object that corresponds to the subject being my conscious awareness, the
yeah.
object being the happening can be external and internal. There can be external sensations that I can become aware of, or there can be
Mm,
internal sensations like thoughts, emotions, um, these kinds of internal stimuli. But for my actual conscious experience, all that really matters is that those are all objects of which I can become aware. Um, but then as I delved even deeper, it seemed to me that rather than just identifying myself as this subject that becomes aware of these objects, like I'm some sort of, I think Hume has a really good analogy for this, as Hume talks about the stage, and all the actors and characters on the stage are the thoughts, the perceptions, the sensations, the feelings, and the stage
sure.
itself is the awareness. And I think even beyond that, through my experiences with meditation, the conclusion I've kind of come to is that there is no subject without an object. Like, if there's ever a point where you don't have an object of awareness, it doesn't seem like there's a subject at all. And in my readings of some of the things that the Buddhists were talking about, where they talk about the self being an illusion, and they talk about these deep meditative states, it seems like that they're reaching this sort of non-dualistic nature of selfhood, where there is no consciousness outside of this subject object relationship. It seems like you need both an object and a subject simultaneously, and that is what consciousness is each one of these objects being experienced subjectively, and our brains string this together to make it seem like it's this continuous experience that we call our conscious awareness. I don't know if that's making
Right, right. No, no, that does make sense. But when you say there's no subject without object, like it sort of like I think, well, if you don't have a brain, you're obviously not going to have a subjective experience. So
yes.
by object, do you mean that there's no subjective experience of external things, or are you talking internally as well?
Yeah, so by object, I'm talking about anything that you can be aware of. So you can be aware
Yes.
of a perception, of a sensation, you can be aware of a thought that you're having. Anything that your subjective awareness can be aware of is an object. They'll often talk about
Mm,
an object of meditation, like when you focus on something like your breath or a mantra or whatever.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, I've actually, so I've done a little bit of traveling, and spent some time with some Buddhist monks, like
Yeah.
in Bhutan. And I want to share this analogy that one of the Buddhist monks told me that has really stuck with me, because I thought it was just such a interesting analogy. And I always, I've gone back and thought about it more and more throughout the years. It's been like, God, I think I was in Bhutan like 10 years ago now. So um,
Mm,
I actually got to make friends with some monks there, and it was a really big culture shock, because I was expecting the cultures to be really, really different. And then I was in college at the time, and going to Bhutan and living with the monks for like, you know, I got to do their whole daily routine for a day.
Yeah.
And I would kept being struck like, this is so much like just being a college student. It really like the culture shock was by how
Right.
similar it was, because like this
Yep.
monk, you know, was trying to like, oh hey, let me add you on Facebook, taking out his iPhone and like trying to add me on Facebook. And like we're going to classes and they're like doing studies and they have to pass a test to get to the next level of monkitude, and they have
Mhm.
roommates and they have, you know, a cafeteria. Like it just felt like the same thing I was doing in college. It was crazy. But this monk had said that
That's not really a culture shock. That's a culture shock because you're expecting the culture to be different and it's
yes,
not.
I mean,
So it's like a culture reverse shock kind
yeah,
of
I
thing.
don't know what
That's
the
interesting.
terminology is, but yeah, I went
Right,
there
right.
expecting it to be so different. Like that's what I had been primed on, of these romantic notions of monks, you know, meditating alone on the mountaintop or whatever. And I
Yeah.
did actually see that. I did go up to the mountaintop and I did see a monk up there. But I also saw the head monk. He like all the monks, and this just kind of reminds me of just how religions are in general, like even more secular ones like Buddhist religions.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they all the monks had said, oh, the head monk, he's been up on the mountaintop for 6 years and he's supposed to be staying up there for 9 years, 9 months, 9 weeks, 9 days, and then he'll come back down and he'll be enlightened and all that stuff. And I was like, oh man, I gotta see this guy. So like they're like, no, you're not allowed up on the mountain. And I was, you know, kind of cheeky. And so I went the long way up the back of the mountain and spent like the whole day like trying to hike up, like so I could catch a glimpse of this monk. I wasn't trying to disturb him or anything. I just wanted to like see it for myself. And I get to like a chain link fence that says caution, no trespassing, meditation in progress beyond this point. And I was like, they had
Wow.
an actual like utility sign about it. And like I kind of like glimpsed through this chain link fence that there's like a little house, and there's like it's a nice house. It's not like a cabin or whatever. It's a nice, like a tiny little house, but a nice one. And there's a satellite TV dish on the top of this house. And I'm like,
What?
and there's like 4 cars in the driveway. And I'm like, this guy's watching the World Cup. Like it was during the 2014 World Cup. And I was like, this guy is not, he's not up here meditating in self-reflective silence. Like he's just living it up. And like I just like was like, dang, man. Like, so that just kind of, I don't know, that kind of encapsulates a lot about what I think about religion. But okay, what I wanted
No
to say,
wonder they stop people from going up there. It's like, no, don't look at the monk too
yeah,
hard. He's deep in contemplation.
exactly.
It's the World Cup.
The
Yeah,
the analogy that I wanted to talk about was the monk
yeah.
told me about the self, that he said that, you know, meditating and trying to find the self is kind of like peeling layers away from a banana tree. So I don't know if you've ever seen a banana tree, but there's all these
Yeah, yeah,
layers
sure.
and you can peel them off. He said, and in meditation, that's what we do, is we peel away these layers. We like do deep introspection to seek the self. And he said, you peel off layer after layer after layer, and eventually all you're left with is a pile of layers. And there was nothing
Mhm.
ever in the core of it. Like, so
Right.
it's like a, you know, one of the big revelations that the Buddha had, or that like the Chan Buddhists or the Zen Buddhists in Japan had, was that the self itself is an illusion. And that kind of rang true for my own experiences with meditation, but then also echoed a lot of the things that I was learning about neuroscience as well, and just sort of
Mm.
how the brain works on a molecular level. Each molecule in the brain is reacting deterministically from the molecules that preceded it. Like it's like bumping molecules bumping into each other. And it seemed to me that if I was more than just this deterministic process of molecular activity in my brain, then that would seem to imply that at some stage in that step, that sequence of like molecules hitting each other and hitting each other and hitting each other, eventually one of those molecules would have to behave differently in a way that could
Mhm.
introduce some sort of free will that varied from just the mechanistic outputs of this incredibly complex interaction that's occurring in, you know, the salty waters inside my brain. um, and I just didn't see any room for that. So it seemed like the brain is making these computations, it's making these decisions, it's taking inputs, processing them into outputs, and even making efference copies and iterating things internally, making all of these loops to eventually get to some sort of output or behavior. And there didn't seem to be any room for the self in that beyond just the brain giving me this experience of justifying what those outputs and inputs were doing. Like that process that's occurring in my brain, it seems like it's a narrative construction in order to like paint this story of, oh, okay, that's how I came to that decision, this was my thought process, even though that doesn't necessarily have to have any basis in reality. Your brain could have been doing something entirely different from the rationalization that you came up with for your decision, but you get this story out of it that sort of makes sense from a narrative perspective of, I'm a self, I made this decision because of X, Y, and Z reasons. And very often when people do that, the reasons why they think they're making the decision are almost entirely removed from the actual reasons why that decision was reached in the brain activity.
Yeah, Sam Harris says something very, very similar, that your brain will make decisions and then will come up for reasons as to why.
Yes.
Part of that sounds, and that's sort of determinism.
Yeah.
That sort of says that. I don't know if I'm fully on board with determinism. I kind of lean towards compatibilism, where I think that, because one of the things that I notice is that random thoughts do kind of come up. We have these thoughts that go, hey, I should, skinny dip. And then I'm like, well, that's a bad idea. Like these ideas that we have sort of more or less randomly, but we kind of dismiss them. And so I'm wondering if the seed of free will is the brain's ability to come up with truly random things, but us to select them. But then what occurs to me is, well, what determines the selection criteria? Yes. And then that provides another sort of kicking the can down. So sort of saying, well, it can bring up random processes is kicking the can down the road, because then there has to be something to select for it. But I think I agree. I don't know if you've heard Leah Filius talk about this, but that ability to choose between different random ideas or different random selections, what about that is not free will? Like, if you can choose whether you will act on something, or that's a stupid thought, I'm not going to act on it.
Yeah, so I just reject. Okay, so first of all, I want to lay this out that you basically have the majority position in terms of philosophers. I think the majority of philosophers are compatibilist.
Yes.
I don't know about where the majority of neuroscientists fall on this question.
Well, I just want to say one thing about that. Yeah. Like, I agree the majority is, but it's something that there appears to be no way to falsify compatibilism or determinism. It seems to be one of those things where, like, if you bring up, hey, this is all determined, there's no way I can show to you that, hey, I actually had free will. And on the other hand, anything I suggest I could do randomly, you could say, hey, it's determined. So there's no real way.
I would posit that if it could be shown that there is a physical process that is not just behaving deterministically on a macro scale, or if there's somehow these probabilistic quantum phenomenon have some sort of effect on our brain's decision making, then I think that opens up the idea of falsifying determinism. So I do think that it can be falsified. If you could show me a process that is a physical process that is not deterministic on macro scales, then I would probably change my mind on this. I know that there's I think a geneticist or a neuroscientist, Mitchell, who tries to make this argument of saying that, quantum mechanics is not strictly speaking deterministic on micro scales of individual particles. It's probabilistic. And he makes the argument that these probabilistic, indeterminate quantum phenomenon can create a sort of noise, that it makes neural activity just noisy enough to where there's a little bit of wiggle room where he tries to insert free will. I don't buy that argument necessarily. I think, I mean, I don't buy that quantum phenomenon are having that kind of effect on the macro scale of neural activity, especially when what we know about neural activity is that there's a lot of coarse grain corrections that go on to account for random errant noise in the and it's more so the larger scale patterns of activity that matter for a lot of actual cognition. So I don't buy that argument. I see with the way that the brain behaves appears to be deterministic, following the laws of physics and chemistry. I'm not aware of any experiment that has shown any wiggle room in that process for it to be non-deterministic. If such a process could be shown, I think that would be a means of falsifying determinism. But
right.
I sort of lean more towards sort of a, Robert Sapolsky is a really big figure. He's a neurobiologist. He studied like baboon brains for decades and decades. And he basically came like through intense observation and knowledge about baboon neural anatomy. He basically got to the point where he knew his baboons so well that he could predict all of their behaviors. Like they didn't do anything surprising. He knew what they were going to do. When they have a certain stimulus, they have a certain reaction. And it was just like, he knew what neurotransmitters were firing. He knew what behavior they're going to take. And it seemed like, we're certainly more complicated. Our behaviors have a much more complex procedure between inputs and outputs. But I don't see enough wiggle room in order for free will to come about. And a lot of people will say, well, my definition of free will is too stringent. I'm talking about like libertarian free will.
Right. Yeah.
The ability to have chosen otherwise.
Yes.
That's central contention, is that there is no potential to have chosen otherwise. If you had the same inputs, you'd get the same outputs. There's not you might have this thing that you feel is a decision that you've made. But
the problem there is the same, like the brain takes so much input, like such a volume of data, that you're really into philosophy and talking about possible worlds kind of thing. Like you would have to have a completely different series of events from the start of the universe kind of thing. Like you would have to have the same life because everything inputs into the output. And that's where I find determinism. Deterministic things like physics and stuff, that's fine. But deterministic things like, well, if you had another possible world that was exactly the same and I had exactly the same life, I would make exactly the same reaction. But how do you actually demonstrate that? Because we only have one world.
I think that looking at these processes, really examining these processes in detail in the brain could help clarify that. Because, if you're saying that you have no problem with physics being deterministic, and if every single molecule in the brain is obeying deterministic physical laws, then it sounds like you have to be saying that at some scale there has to emerge this consciousness phenomenon that is somehow non-deterministic, even though all the parts that make it up are behaving deterministically. So if it's the sum of all these parts that each individual part is behaving deterministically, I don't see where any indeterminacy comes into it.
Yeah, and that's something that causes a problem for me. And Alex O'Connor, who the more I see of him, the more I absolutely respect him.
He's great.
He sort of says, well, it's either random or it's determined. And if it's random, it's still not free will because it's random. And it's a very, very good argument. But I want to quote something by the Hitch, and he sort of like jokingly said, I have to believe in a free will. I have no choice. But what interests me of that statement is actually, do you think free will is something that sort of evolved or humans sort of have to believe? Do you think it is we are propelled towards that belief, like much in the way we're propelled towards, I don't know if you've heard of the God-shaped hole, which is sort of humans have a propensity to putting entities and agents into
Yes.
things we don't know.
Yes.
Do you think we also have a propensity to believing we have more agency than we actually do?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that it's essential to the way that we have evolved to experience the world. Um, like I said, like I think on a fundamental level, the notion of the self is not a real thing that is existing. I think that it's an illusion that comes up with how we perceive the world externally and internally. But it's a necessary illusion because I certainly can't imagine what living day to day life would be like if you didn't have a notion of the self. Like it seems to
Right.
me that um, like consciousness, free will, these things evolved to fulfill like evolutionary purposes. Like there are advantages to these things in terms of behavioral outputs. Um,
Yeah.
I I would point to recently I've come to think that I think energy efficiency and energy use has a lot to do with this because you could have some sort of you're familiar with like philosophical zombies that behave
Yes.
like people, but they
Yeah.
have no qualia or free will at all. And you
Yeah,
could
they're just based upon just to explain to everybody. So a philosophical zombie is a person but with no actual consciousness that is just reacting to stimuli, but has been programmed or hardwired. I hate that term, but hardwired to sort of respond to the stimuli exactly how a conscious person would respond. And
yeah.
then the thing is suggested, well, how is that different than a person? And how would you be able to tell if it responded exactly how a person would? And it did exactly what a person would, how could you tell they are conscious?
So um, here's my claim with that, right? Is that I do
Yes.
think that you would be able to tell the difference. I think that one would be vastly more energy efficient than the other. Because if you have to have a philosophical zombie, then basically its hardwire, its programming has to be set for every single different scenario, right? Like every
Yes.
input has to have like a set output, and each one of these scenarios has to have its own like programming. It's just a nightmare to try to encode all of that. But if you encode a sense of self and self-preservation, all of a
Mm.
sudden from that sense, that subjective qualia sense of self-preservation, you can respond to a vast array of different inputs and different situations in advantageous ways without having to have a pre-programmed response to them. You can, through just this sensation
Right.
of a drive for self-preservation and a sense of self that's experiencing this, it seems like a
Mm.
much more energy efficient way to have advantageous behaviors.
Well, I don't know about energy efficient, but like efficiency as far as data processing,
Yeah.
we know that that is as opposed to, because we have procedural languages in computing, and that's sort of where I came from is sort of an IT background. So we have procedural languages that are like if then else, and they're the ones that you're talking about, just a response to conditions or conditional responses. But then we have machine learning, and the whole point is that you with machine learning, you don't need nearly as much code, so it's a lot faster, and it will get better over time, but start out worse because it's not procedural. So I think that's a direct analogy where, but I don't know about energy efficiency. I think that it's, but definitely as far as sort of um, like processing time,
Yes.
definitely as far as sort of the what am I trying to say? The precision of what you're trying to do. Yeah, it's definitely machine learning definitely outperforms
So
procedural with complex functions. Yes.
so that does play into overall energy expenditures of a system. Like the computers are capable of things that humans can do, like playing chess. They can beat humans in chess, and they can
Oh yeah, yeah.
have these intellectual, like they can have intelligence.
Mhm.
But when you look at how much energy it costs the computer to make these outputs versus a human brain, it's not even close. The computer is
Right.
orders of magnitudes more energy intensive. The
Yes.
human brain is extremely energy efficient. Even though, it uses a huge amount of energy relative to our entire body, but relative to a computer doing the same kinds of computations,
it's nothing.
Yeah, exactly. The brain is vastly energy efficient in comparison. So it seems like if you have all of these, that's the line of reasoning that I've come to thinking recently, is that in trying to maximize energy efficiency, there are certain patterns of information processing that have advantage because they have so much more universal applicability than individually like programming behaviors. So that's sort of how I've thought about the idea of consciousness or the self, or like, the idea of having free will, of evolving, is having advantages of behaviors that are very, very energy efficient for computation. And one more thing on compatibilism, I'm completely open to being, I guess, compatible pilled or whatever. Like I've just never been able to understand compatibilism. Like, people have tried to explain it to me. Leo's tried to explain it to me. I've tried to read up papers from compatibilists, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, what their notion of free will doesn't seem like free will. It sounds like, if you just say free will is just whatever your brain comes up with for like what you feel like doing. And even if yourself is not actually determining what that is, they say that it's free will because it is generated by your brain. But to me, that's not free will. I can't get over that. It seems to me that the compatibilists are trying to redefine what free will is. That's where I fall on that. And I'm open to being proven, like, I'm open to changing my mind.
So as per Alex kind of says, like, in some way it has to rely on randomness. And when we get into random events, random things, and I've been sort of really, I'm really on the fence with free will. I don't know either way. I used to be like, oh yes, we definitely have free will. I've kind of really softened that stance to say, well, I don't know. Because both seem unfalsifiable. But I totally get where you're coming from. I have a lot of sympathy for the determinist part. But when we talk about random events, like, for instance, we might say a stone falling down a hill is random, like it just bounces in random places. But really, it's not. Sorry. Well, this is the thing. When talking colloquially, we'll say, oh, it randomly hit this person, right? But it's not really random. It's all up to the physics involved. It's just when we have stuff that is so data intensive, like weather, for instance, it seems to be random patterns, but it forms a whole, and weather systems emerge from those random patterns. But it's not really random. It's sort of like, well, there's too much data to analyze. We call it random, or it's pseudo-random. Again, back to computing, a pseudo-random number is one that's generated on predefined variables. Like, for instance, it might take, the second that it is during the minute, and to make a calculation, and it comes out with a random number from that. But it's not actually random. A computer can't deal with random numbers. And I'm wondering, can the universe deal with random things either? Or is it all deterministic? Do we just say, hey, this is random because we cannot calculate the variables that went into that rock falling in that way?
So I think that you're hitting on something that I feel like is often falsely equivocated when talking about stuff like this. You're definitely not doing it. You're pointing out that these things are not equivalent. There's a difference between if something can be determined, as in, like, you can know what the outcome is. It's epistemologically determined, versus if it's following deterministic mechanisms, but there's so many variables involved, and you cannot ever possibly know the initial conditions to find enough detail to ever be able to predict ahead of time what the outcome will be. Those are like chaotic system, like non-linear dynamical systems, like weather you mentioned. So these things are basically epistemologically indeterminate. Like, you cannot determine them because you can never know enough about the variables involved. But these chaotic systems, these nonlinear systems, are still deterministic you just can never, like, the humans and computers can never
Yeah.
measure these things practically to get the answer. But like each step along the way is still a deterministic step. Like in the mathematics of chaos theory, you have like each step in the math that is iterated over and over and over again, for like a fractal or something. Each step is completely determined, but
Right.
you can't determine what the outcome will be after you just keep iterating it over and over and over again. So there's a
Mhm.
difference between if we can determine it based on calculations, if we can know what the outcome will be, versus if it's indeterminate in outcome, but like only because we don't have access to enough information. And I think that still fundamentally those things are all deterministic. It's just outside the scope of our ability to actually determine them. I don't know if that's making
So here's a question for you, Grayson.
yeah.
If there are variables, or let's just call it variables. I understand why we're talking about real things. So, but
Yeah.
I think in computer. So if we're talking about variables, if you can't determine all the variables, how do you know that one of those variables wasn't random?
Um, I think just, and you need to observe enough processes where when you I mean, maybe you can make the argument that this is overly reductionistic, but like when you look at fine enough detail at like
Mhm.
individual, like with the nonlinear steps, when you break it down to just one step instead of iterating 1,000 steps at a time, and you're like, well, I
Yeah.
can't predict what'll happen after that. But if you're just looking at one step at a time, each one of those steps you can see
Mm.
is deterministic. So that's why I'm saying, like, when you do the same thing in the brain and you look at how each molecule is behaving, like you can, when you look at an individual molecule, you might see a bunch of Brownian motion, and you could never
Yeah.
predict, like,
Right. Right.
yeah, you can never predict what motion it's going to do because it looks totally random to you,
Yeah.
because there's too many variables of too many molecules around it bumping into it that you can't possibly predict all this complex pattern. But when you
Just to explain to people, Brownian motion is the movement of molecules or stuff in water that
yeah,
they first noticed it that they could not. It was seemed so random, but as it turns out, even that chaotic system has patterns to it. So
yeah. So
Brownian motion's sort of very well understood.
So when you reduce the complexity of this system down to, say, two molecules,
Right.
well, then there's no Brownian motion. You can know exactly what the scattering activity of those two
Hmm.
molecules is going to be, because now all of a sudden you've lessened the variables down to where you can compute it. And you can see that fundamentally, the only thing that's different between the system you couldn't determine with the Brownian motion is you've just added the number of molecules. So,
Yeah.
like, so if each individual interaction is deterministic and following these scattering equations, then adding more of them, it increases the complexity. It makes it so that you can't determine exactly the path that will happen because it's too
Mhm.
complicated. But when you break it down to each individual interaction that is happening to that molecule, each one is deterministic
Yeah.
and it's following those scattering
And
equations.
I guess that's similar to the three body problem. As soon as you start sort of adding extra pieces to it, it becomes exponentially
Yeah.
more complicated, to the point where we can't follow it. I don't think we're going to sort out determinism in this
One
conversation,
thing
though.
I would like to clarify before we
Yeah,
move
yeah,
on,
sure, sure.
I would say I would use the word probabilistic instead of random, because I struggle to think of anything that's truly random. But when you get down
What's
to
the
the level of,
difference?
okay, so with probabilistic, you say, okay, well, this process has a 70% chance of this happening and a 30% chance of this happening.
Yeah, but we only apply that to like instances. We don't apply that to individual actions.
So to me, I just don't consider that random, because I would consider something to be random
No.
if you couldn't even calculate what the probabilities are. So like if something is random, like I don't know, it just, I would draw a distinction, because with probabilities, for an individual, like if say we're talking about an electron or something, and it's got a
Yeah,
70%
yeah, yeah.
chance of going up and a 30% chance of going down. Each individual electron may seem like it's doing that randomly, but when you do 1,000 electrons and 700 of them go up and 300 go down, look at that. It's basically a determined outcome. So like on an individual level, it's probabilistic. It's got a 70% chance of going in one direction. But when you have 1,000 of them, now it's a totally determined process. You could predict there will be 700 that go up and 300 that go down. I don't know which ones will go up and down, but I can tell you overall it will be deterministic. And so,
well, I think most people misunderstand probability, that it's not prescriptive of what's happening. It's descriptive of what's happening. You're basically taking the number of instances that occur and like categorizing one of them and saying, hey, this the amount of times this happens is this out of the amount of times that it has occurred. So you're sort of just describing the process. You're not prescribe. It doesn't prescribe anything. But I think that the law of large numbers does hold true, that when you get a large enough sample size, or the larger the sample size, the more you hone in on that actual probability that it will occur. So if you flip a coin and you do it once, your probability is 100%. Like it's P=1 for heads or whatever you flipped. But when you start flipping coins, it hones more and more in on that 50%. I think somebody flipped a coin like something like 1 billion times or something like that. It's something ridiculous. Like they sat there and did it and found out that tails has slightly more chance, like ever so slightly more chance, because of the weight of the coin.
To me, the difference between those would be like, say I flip a coin 1,000 times and I get 500 heads and 500 tails. Now say I do it another 5,000 times and I get 6 heads. And then I do it another 1,000 times and I get 300 heads. And every single time I do it, I get a different probability. That would be random to me. That's not probabilistic. That's random.
Right.
So that's how I think about, like, whenever I hear you say random, to me, it's like, it's not even probabilistic. It's where like probabilities could not even be computed because they're not even consistent. That's what I think of when I think of random.
But are there random things? Like, for
no,
instance,
no.
Well, what about the, say, sort of acausal effects? Like, for instance, the decay of radioactive matter.
Probabilistic. It's probabilistic. So like,
Well, we can't apply probability to real world events. A probability is a model of how the thing will act overall. It doesn't apply to individual
yes.
molecules.
Yeah, it's true. Like, you can't look at an individual atom and say this one will decay, this one won't. But you can look at groups of them and say 30% of them will decay. Like that's what I mean by probabilistic. So yeah, like for individual ones, it's probabilistic, not deterministic. But then we see determinism emerging when you have large enough groups. And so I understand why one might describe it as random, but to me, I would differentiate random from probabilistic, because I would think random, it's not even ever going to be consistent enough where you could have a 30% chance of it decaying. Like it has an indeterminate percent chance of doing the decay. That's how I think about it.
Well, yeah, but what we're really talking about, I'm not really talking about, because I mean, we know from the half-life that half of that material will decay over whatever the half-life is. That's, you know, and you know, it will all decay over twice the half-life kind of thing. So but which molecules decay appears, and I can't say for sure, because you know, we don't know why, and it seems to be no reason to. That appears, which molecules appears to be completely random.
Yeah.
Like we can't seem to find anything that would determine this one to stay until the end of double the half-life and this one to decay straight away, you know, like just instantly.
This kind of gets at what made Einstein so uncomfortable about
quantum physics. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that, you know, his famous expression, God does not play with dice.
So someone mentioned that.
He ultimately argued in the famous EPR paper, he ultimately argued that quantum mechanics must be incomplete because that he refused to believe that the fundamental ontology of the world was probabilistic, and he said that he essentially he had strong conviction that one day somebody would come along and create a theory whose fundamental ontology were facts, were deterministic facts that were not probabilities, and that there would be these hidden variables of which
Mm.
the quantum mechanical probabilistic nature of things would emerge. And so he maintained this until his deathbed, that he believed that there were some sort of hidden variables that were capable of explaining this. And what we've learned since then through like experiments with entanglement is that if there are hidden variables, they're either got to be not local, which you kind of have to ditch the entire idea of space and time as being fundamental if you think
Yeah.
that, at least space. And then the other alternative is that if there are local hidden variables, then measurement independence must be violated, which means that, you know,
Mm.
measurement does like measurements are not independent of like the underlying reality, and that is definitely a minority position among
Right.
physicists. That's called superdeterminism.
Well,
So
let me run something by you, because you sort of said the notion of self is illusory. The notion that this is me is illusory. And I wanted to run by you that sort of brought up something I'd read on sort of a quantum reality, but sorry, quantum monism, right? That there is no discrete units as far as we're aware. And sort of I've been playing with this idea. It's been rolling around my head. I don't know how you'd prove it, but it's the idea that everything is actually one thing, and we're just seeing the parts of it. Like, because there's the many and the one problem. Are you familiar with that?
you could go ahead and
Okay, okay. So the many and the one is sort of like, if you're one person, how can you be made of lots of little cells, kind of thing, right? So if you're one thing, how can you be made of lots of little things? And sort of that plays into, well, what is foundational then? Because if you're the foundation, you can't have little things making you up, but they have also little things making them up, like, so little discrete units. So the many and the one sort of says, well, how are we one thing when we're made up of so many smaller things? And what does that mean? And so it's this idea that it's a problem in philosophy that's never actually been overcome. Sort of, so what makes something one thing? And is there such a thing as one thing? As Bree pointed out, we have sort of bacteria that we rely on in our body that isn't us. It's got different DNA. It's different thing, but we consider ourselves just one discrete unit.
yeah. No, I think that's all illusory. I mean, I wouldn't consider. I mean, what I would point to as an analogy for this is like a whirlpool in an ocean. Like
Mhm.
the whirlpool, you can't define where its borders are. You can't say, this object is the whirlpool and the rest of it is the ocean. It's all
Right.
made of the same material. It's just the whirlpool is an activity that the ocean is doing, and it's doing it in a semi-localized area. Like, you can point to a whirlpool and say there it is,
Mm.
but you can't point to the exact boundaries of the whirlpool. And I would say that this is
Right.
pretty exactly analogous to us or
Mm.
consciousness or whatever.
But I'm talking about the universe, like
Yeah.
all of reality.
Yes, so am I.
Right.
But like, yeah, I mean, like, I think that like all of reality would be the ocean, and then each
Mm.
individual thing would be analogous to a whirlpool in that ocean. It's an activity that the ocean is doing
Yeah.
continuously, and there
But
is
that's
no like defined border. You can still, like,
mm.
these things are semi localized. So like, you can, broadly speaking, locate them in space, But if you try to go on higher and higher detail, then your uncertainty gets more and more and more about what is that thing and what is not that thing. So
Right, right.
it's only approximately localized.
Mm. And sort of so what you're describing with the whirlpool is our idea of emergent properties, that whirlpool is emergent from just the
Yeah.
particles sort of behaving as they behave, and it's not a thing in itself. It's actually, but it seems to be more and more as we investigate, things don't seem to be things in and of themselves. They seem to be sort of emergent from the smaller things that make them up. So is there a smallest particle or a smallest quark or a smallest um, um, is there a smallest discrete unit of reality um, at all? And what would that mean for something like infinite regression if there is not a smallest fundamental unit in the universe?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly appears from quantum mechanics that that these things are quantized into discrete units, like particles.
Yeah, but we thought that about atoms as well.
Yes, I mean we did, but we smashed those and
Yeah.
saw what was inside them. What happens if you smash? If you try to probe reality on a smaller and smaller scale, is that it requires more and more energy to do so, and
Mm.
eventually, what happens if you're trying to look inside fundamental particles is that the energy required is just too large that you just create a black hole and you collapse space and time in that region you're looking at. So the
Mhm.
actual like the resolution of reality breaks down at that point when you start to try to look any deeper and any
Right,
smaller
right.
level. Just the
Yeah.
actual resolution of reality breaks and you like make a black hole a hole in space-time. So it does seem like these things are not continuous. This is not an
Mhm.
infinite regress. You do hit a hard point where you can no longer probe any deeper and just reality breaks at that point. So it does seem to be hinting at something um, more fundamental, that potentially like space and time are emergent phenomenon from some more underlying fundamental physics that's going on that doesn't include space or time maybe. um,
Mhm.
and we're certainly, lots of physicists have been saying this, like
Yeah.
like prominent physicists from like Ivy League institutions have been saying this in the last decade or so. But and some of them are working on it, and they've put forward like Lee Smolin has a energetic causal set theory in which there is no space on a fundamental level.
Right.
Space emerges only when you have uh, larger macro levels. So there are
Mm.
theoretical models that are being generated for this, but so far it's not like we've hit upon some new big theory that has made a prediction using this kind of non-local physics. So
Right.
it's sort of on the very frontier of our understanding of physics and reality at the moment. So
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
say.
Well, all of this is so hypothetical and so hard to sort of there could be a number of things that have multiple hypotheses that any one of them could be true. We kind of have like I think that the more we explore the universe, the more we find out how little we know about it. And do you find people are, sort of outraged by that? I do run into some creationists who are sort of like, oh, we know less than we did before kind of thing. And it's like, well, we know like of our ignorance of things. I don't know um whether you run into that a lot.
I think that maybe the people that are used to having easy, like readily understood answers maybe feel
Mm,
that way. Like some people are uncomfortable with uncertainties, especially when they've been told all their lives to any question that they ask, oh, well, God just did it that way. And then, like, oh,
right.
okay, that's a good enough explanation for me. Who am I to think
Hmm.
about what God's rationale was for this? Uh,
Right.
and so
But if we follow the chain of logic of that, then we would believe that God throws lightning bolts to this day. Like
yeah,
we'd never investigate why things actually work the way they work. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. I was just gonna say, I think among those people, or like people that are used to having quick and easy answers, that might be the case. But I think for people that have maybe their whole lives have understood the fact that we haven't known everything, and that there's big questions that have been left unanswered, and that there are mysteries in the world still. Um, I think that there's a certain level of excitement among scientists when they deal with those problems.
Yeah,
Maybe even beyond the career level of being able to study these problems for a living, but just excitement at what remains to be discovered, a sense of adventure in that way. But um, certainly, I hope that we will make progress on these questions. I mean,
sure.
I would prefer to have answers than to not have answers. But if we
Right.
don't, like, I mean, I think that you have to mature to the point where you can understand that there's always going to be questions. We're never going to have all the answers. There are probably many aspects of the universe that are just epistemologically closed off to humans. Like, no matter how deep our understanding, we may never know about some of these
That's right.
questions.
Yeah.
So
But
I think
how do we
everyone
know what
that.
well, how do we know what we can discover if we don't attempt to go out and discover it? You know what I mean? Like if we say, hey, we'll never know that and don't attempt it, how will we, like it's kind of like the infinity question. Like, how do you know if something's infinite if you can't count it?
Yeah.
The same is true with knowledge. How do you know that knowledge is unattainable if you don't try to attain that knowledge? And even if you fail to attain that knowledge, a lot of knowledge that we have now, we've tried to attain in the past and failed,
Yeah.
but then somebody figured it out. So how do you know unless you actually do it? It's this kind of paradox that, well, like we'll never know what knowledge is unattainable or
I was
what
never
knowledge
saying
we.
that we should give up on searching for it.
No, no, I don't think you. I don't think you were saying that. But what made you like? So really, we're talking about easy answers versus the hard work of finding out what the real answer is. And what, as far as I know, you were raised in a religious household. Is that correct?
No, actually, I was not.
Okay. What made you like look to the hard answers? Because the field that you've chosen, biochem, is hardly a easy field. So what sort of attracted you towards a structural chemistry and inorganic chemistry?
It was kind of a little bit of a mad scientist kind of goal when I was in high school of wanting to.
Okay. Oh, do tell. Yeah.
I really became interested in the idea of genetic engineering, and specifically the genetic engineering of new fruit varieties. I had an idea that
Okay.
I wanted to genetically engineer a mix of a strawberry and a cantaloupe. Because my favorite fruit combination is strawberry and cantaloupe. If you haven't ever tried it, try like 2/3 cantaloupe to
Mhm.
1/3 strawberry in the same bite, mix them in your mouth, and they will combine to like a gestalt of flavor that is more than the sum of their parts. It doesn't taste like a strawberry, it doesn't taste like a cantaloupe. There's like a new, distinct, and I would argue delicious flavor. Like that, whatever that flavor is, that is my
Mhm.
favorite fruit. So
Oh, they go well together because
yeah.
like I've had them in fruit salad and stuff. Do you know what we call a cantaloupe in Australia? You're gonna love this. It's a rock melon.
Are you kidding me, or is that real?
No, that's real. Look it up. Look, you don't believe me? Look it up.
What are you
Like I
talking?
know that. Look, half of the things that Australians say sound like a joke, and that's by design. So no one really takes us seriously, so we can ambush you.
What do you
Um,
call honeydew?
honeydew.
Yeah, the green melon.
Yeah, yeah, we call it honeydew. What are you talking about? Are
What?
you crazy?
Okay, so you only silly name for cantaloupe. Okay, well, okay. So,
No, no, it's rock melon. It does look like a rock. Yeah, no, Sven's onto it. It looks like a rock. Yeah,
but anyways, so in high school, I became really enraptured with this idea of a strawberry or a canterbury,
yeah.
and I started looking into like flavor
How about a
chemistry.
straw melon?
I
Berry melon?
don't know. I like strawberry aesthetically, but then if
Okay.
I'd ever done it and actually made it, and I could have written my memoirs, called it a Canterbury Tales. So
Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah.
yeah. So
That's pretty
anyways,
good. Yeah, no, I
um,
like that.
So yeah, I got really into flavor chemistry and
Mhm.
researching like the bio chemical pathways that lead to the creation of flavor compounds, and really trying to figure out what kind of tapestry of flavor compounds what was creating this flavor that I loved, that I wanted to replicate in a cantaloupe, and which genes would be involved in like getting some of those strawberry flavor compounds to be produced by a cantaloupe. And that was just such an immensely complex problem that
Right.
I ended up
Right.
learning a lot about biochemistry and
Mhm.
flavor chemistry in high school, by just like, I had like a binder like this thick of scientific publications I had gone through like about the subject. And I got really really into genetic engineering from that. And then in college I wanted to simplify so that there was something that I could create that just had one modification, rather than, because there are multiple biochemical steps that go into synthesizing these flavor
Yeah,
compounds.
yeah.
It's an immensely complex problem to approach. Um, and so I simplified it to have you ever heard of the marble berry?
No, no, I haven't.
It it is the shiniest known biological material. Pollia
Okay.
compensata is the Latin name. It's a berry that's inedible. There's really nothing inside of it. It's just this really really beautiful skin on this berry. If you could pull up a picture for it, maybe people
Yeah,
would.
yeah, will do, will do.
Um, and so I became really, really interested in this, because the only scientific paper at the time that had been written about this berry was a physics paper explaining how it got its amazing color. Because the color
Right.
is not from any pigment. It's not like chemical color like that. It's coming from physics, from the actual bending of light rays on this helical path as it goes down to the berry, and then it bounces back up. And depending on the thickness of the berry skin, the incoming light is reflected back at a certain wavelength. So the
Mm.
average is this really deep, rich, beautiful metallic blue that you see. But when you look at it in detail, I don't know if there are any close-up shots that you can find, but when you look at it in detail, the subtle variations in thickness on the skin of these berries create like every color of the rainbow. It's like a pixelated little look of reds and yellows and greens, and then when you like go zoom out, you just get this really deep rich blue that looks kind of like the morpho butterfly, which also does not use pigment and uses structural coloration. So I became really really interested in how was the berry doing this. um, and these berries don't need to be edible because they're so shiny and beautiful that the birds just pick them and move them. Yeah, there's a close up shot. You can see all those little
Yeah.
colors. It's like a really really a beautiful berry. and
Mm.
and so yeah.
It's almost like oil on water kind of thing is what it
Yes.
reminds me of. Yeah.
And so I got it in my head that if I could isolate what process was creating this coloration, because it's in the way that the cellulose layers are laid down, where they're like each layer is a little bit off at an angle to the next layer, so it creates this helical kind of pattern that spirals up and down, and though that's what's affecting these photons when they go and interact with it. And so
Mm.
I thought, if I could pin that down, it seems like it could be a slight modification, like a slight mutation in the way that these helicose fibrils are laid down, which is controlled by these like rosettes of micro tubules. And so I had pinned it down to something that I thought biochemically was underpinning this creation. I thought, okay, if I could take the genes that were responsible for altering those microtubules in that way and insert those genes into a watermelon, and you could get a watermelon that had skin like this.
Right.
A delicious watermelon, but like the outside of it looks like this beautiful sapphire jewel, and this color never fades. It never gets old. Like that, like you can have berries that are 50 years old and they're gonna still be just as bright and vibrant and beautiful. Um, and so I got onto that project a bit, and that's more so why I went into biochemistry. I took a lot of genetics courses.
Yeah.
Um, And yeah, I actually became one of the first people in the United States to order those berries because they were not commercially available when I first learned about them. And then as I like set a Google alert basically to whenever anything new came on about those berries, I would get alerted. And when they were finally became commercially available, I was like right away, the very day that they first popped up on the internet, I made my order, and it was like 6 months to ship them from Tanzania to me.
Wow.
And I ended up growing them in my university greenhouse. And kind of, doing a little bit of experiments on them to try to like see if I could pinpoint what exactly was causing this pattern, like using like chemical agents to kind of stop the microtubules from moving, and stuff like that. So I got really into that. That's why I initially went into biochemistry, and then it was only sort of after doing a lot of market research and finding that public sentiment is very much against genetically engineered foods, um,
Yeah.
and and such a product essentially would have very little to any investors. It would basically, I didn't have enough capital
Right.
to have a lab that would be able to um, make any of this product, even if it was scientifically even if
Yeah. I don't think the demand is there for
yeah,
Canterbury's,
yeah,
unfortunately. I
it's
don't.
really not. So I figured,
But
society's
that's okay.
not ready for my
It's a good idea though. Yeah, you're too far ahead of your time. That's the problem. In the future, people will want Canterbury's, I have no doubt.
I mean, I
You know,
have very little doubt that you can create foods that are much more delicious than any foods that we have today with human ingenuity. So I'm a big optimist on that.
well, I think there's been amazing things done with sort of frost resistance and pest
Yeah,
resistance and things like that. Like I don't really have a problem with genetically engineered product. I think that people get this idea that it's bad for you without actually understanding that changing the genetic structure isn't actually suddenly going to give you cancer or something.
yeah,
But I think the problem lies with like for instance, Monsanto making Terminator seeds to sell to farmers, ones that will produce a crop and then die.
yes,
Um, it's kind of, the commercialization of these genetic, like in order to make money, they're doing these, they're doing these products which are sort of genetic products that are bad for humanity. Not in the way that you think that if you consume them suddenly you're going to die. No, it's just bad as in ripping off people. I have a problem with.
so yeah, I think that like the profit incentives right now for these big companies that actually have the
Mm,
capital infrastructure to be doing genetic engineering of food is very much more so like engineering them to increase shelf life, increased pest resistance.
yeah.
Um, not there's really no push or interest to actually modify flavors,
Mm,
and try to make things more delicious, which really bums me out. I mean, I am definitely no fan of Monsanto and their business
yeah.
practices.
We've got a lot to thank Monsanto for. DDT, I think, was Monsanto. That causes all kinds of problems.
I think they
Um,
invented the green LED.
the green LED.
I think so.
That incredible wasn't that incredibly difficult to do?
I think that's the blue LED. That's the really difficult one.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's not like Monsanto has done all bad, but just the number of products that they have put on the market
Yeah.
that have been so bad for humankind is just incredible. Like the long line of it, and they seem to their practices. Like for instance, they patent these Terminator products, and when one gets into a field of somebody else's, they kind of sue them even though that person doesn't want it, doesn't, it's kind of just their practices are absolutely terrible.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of synonymous with evil business practices in the modern day.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
but yeah, that's the
And
path
so,
that actually got me into biochemistry. It was not like a search for deep answers. It was like a
Right.
search for creating new flavors.
Hey, I think that's a great idea. I don't know if people will want to do that. Like I don't know, and I don't know because I mean, as far as taste is concerned, that is such a subjective thing. I mean, you might like the Canterbury, but somebody else might say, "Well, that is absolutely disgusting."
But there are
You know,
broad
I sorry.
there are broad trends though.
Well, that's true. That's true. And catering for those broad trends is generally what we do in the food industry. Like I get that. It's just, yeah, no, I totally understand that. I'm just not sure that that would be a priority for me rather than, I don't know, producing a crop that, has a more of a harvest so we could feed hungry people,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
but that's really fascinating that you sort of, you had this idea of creating a mutant offspring and went into the industry to do it. That's awesome. What got you like interested in or insane enough to come onto the internet and debate with people and sort of do what you're doing now?
Mostly it's because I really like to argue. I mean, a lot of people find it to be very energetically taxing to argue with people, but for me, it like gets my engines revving. I really enjoy the sort of back and forth argumentation. So I found
Yeah.
that, you know, even in a world where like I had no like material needs or whatever, all my needs were met. And I was thinking, what would I be doing with my time? I would probably still be enjoying arguing with people, like even wacky doodles on the internet, creationists, like anti-vaxxers, whatever. I still like for whatever reason, whatever is wrong with my brain, I still really enjoy like arguing because I
Yeah.
find that it specifically makes me have to hone my thinking, strengthen my position logically. It makes me have to think about how do I communicate. Like how do I get this idea across to someone that it has a completely different frame of reference to me. um,
Mhm.
and it makes me learn new things. Like sometimes they will
Yep.
bring things up I never thought about, and then I will go down an entire rabbit hole of learning that I never would have been set on otherwise. So I just found that I was really enjoying that activity. And I was watching a bunch of debate content on YouTube. A lot of my arguments were unfortunately with my friends and family or with like random people on Facebook or social media. And I thought, why don't I just try to actually make this somewhat more productive, and get my argumentative nature out in terms of having an actual channel for this so that I can elevate myself from just the comments on
Yeah.
some Facebook posts, because Facebook, the algorithm is literally always just suggesting stuff that it knows I will want to engage with because I'll want to argue with the post or people that are
Mhm.
talking about it in the comment section. Like I get flat earth stuff recommended to me. I get like anti-climate change stuff, anti-vaxxers. I get young earth creation content. I get like race realists or hoteps or Tartaria people, like anything that Facebook is like, oh, this is so crazy, Grayson's gonna have to engage with it. So it knows its audience. It knows that those are the things that I really like engaging with. And like literally my whole life I've been interested in people that think radically different than me. um, Even when I wasn't engaging with them, like even in middle school,
Yeah.
I would listen to um, like, do you remember Thunderfoot on YouTube?
Yes. Yeah.
So I would
Um,
listen to a lot of Thunderfoot, but I would also listen to a lot of like the creationist side as well. Like there was this guy, Shock
mhm.
of God, and
Oh, wasn't he terrible?
he was so bad, and he would make content while
Right.
he's driving around on his motorcycle, and he would just be talking about how like evolution is so stupid and how atheism is so stupid. And I don't know why, but I was even like back in like middle school, I was even fascinated by it back then. Like I'm just so fascinated how these people's minds work and how like how you can go through reality, and we're in the same reality, and your worldview can be so radically detached from that reality. And
Mm.
like you're experiencing an entirely different world where like miracles and witches and stuff are happening and God is talking to you directly, and it's just like it fascinates me. and I just like want to like engage with that person and talk about them and like understand them more. It just is like a car accident on the highway where you just can't help but like stare.
Yeah. Like
Yeah,
the rubbernecking of these
exactly.
people is
So
just
yeah,
incredible.
that's a good way of actually saying it. Basically, I entered into YouTube because I was rubbernecking so hard on all of these people on the internet that I would want to debate if I had a channel, and I just like couldn't help but be fascinated by them. And so I thought, well, if I have a channel, then I can actually engage with these people,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of fun for me. I mean, it's I have a lot of fun doing this.
Oh, I mean, I guess I'm slightly different. I like the ideas, and I like processing through them, and sort of the analysis of the ideas is really what I come down to. And so, I don't get me wrong, I don't shy away from a good disagreement and a good debate myself, but it's more the process of analyzing that I really enjoy. The analysis of, hey, is this idea hold up or does it not hold up, kind of thing. But um, so you said you really like the debate. What is it about it that you enjoy? Like why are you attracted to the debate structure rather than panels and discussions, or making short form content, kind of thing?
Um, I don't. It's hard for me to pin down what it is that makes me so much more interested in it. Like, I still do enjoy making like science communication videos.
Mm.
I still really do enjoy science communication, but like even in just the media that I consume, like I rarely ever listen or consume media that I already agree with. Like there's something
Mhm.
that's boring to me about it. If there's not a point of disagreement that I have with it, then there's like this morbid curiosity that's missing, and then I'll be
Are
sort
you a drama llama? Is that basically what you're saying? You're just
okay,
a
not in my
drama guy?
personal life, not in my personal life, but maybe
Right,
in, like
right.
the ideosphere or something.
Uh-huh.
I just, like I said, I mean, I'm fascinated by people who disagree with me.
Mhm.
And like the people that agree with me, like we can be friends, but I'm not like, I feel like, okay, I already know your worldview. I already know your thought process because we're so
Mhm.
similar. So like,
Yeah.
why is that interesting? Like, it's like, and I'm not talking to you directly, Mark, but
No, well, I didn't think so before. Maybe that's
well, like,
fine.
yes, because we do have a lot of similarities in our approach. Like,
But
there
we
are
do
differences
disagree
too.
on
We
certain
we
things.
we
Yeah,
all
yeah,
we kind of started this. I mean, it's kind of emblematic because we found a point of disagreement, or like a slight point of disagreement at the beginning there with free will and
sure.
determinism, and
Yeah.
then I think we both really enjoyed engaging that topic, and so
Oh,
I
absolutely.
I just sort of gravitate more, and I find myself interested more in engaging with material that's from a divergent perspective from mine. Um,
Sure.
so
Yeah.
yeah, that's I guess what draws me to it. I don't know exactly what it is that gives my brain the dopamine whenever I'm in an argument versus like talking with somebody who I agree with a lot. Then I'm
Mhm.
like, yeah, you're a really cool person. We could definitely be friends because we agree on all this. But it's like I don't want to just hear my own opinion back at me, I guess.
Same. Yeah. So why do you think people like, because people live in that world where they can't stand to hear a differing opinion? They form echo chambers, they form these groups of people that don't disagree on literally anything. And like one slight bit of disagreement, I'm looking at you, Christians, they'll kind of ostracize them, for that point of disagreement. Why do you think that is?
I think it probably has to do with this sense of like community and belonging that so many people crave.
Mm.
And like you want to be surrounded by people that you feel like you're similar with, that you belong. And yeah, just having that sense of community. Um, and I think that I'm abnormal in that sense to where like I don't really have that sort of craving as it seems like a lot of other people do. Like I don't get like I don't really experience much of like loneliness or wanting to like connect with like I don't know. A lot of people seem to experiencing that, and I just don't seem to have it to nearly the same degree as others. So maybe that could be it. Is that I'm not craving this sense of belonging or community. I'm kind of like, you know, I'm like, I don't know. I really enjoy engaging with differences. Like when I talked about going to Bhutan, and how I was sort of going for that culture shock. I wanted to
Mm,
experience something very, very different. And what ended up shocking me were the similarities.
yeah.
Um, so it was like, I definitely was going out there to experiencing something radically different than my own experiences. So there's all,
Especially the similarities of the guy watching TV on top of the mountain,
yeah,
where you're expecting like a mud hut with a dude in meditating all that time.
yeah,
He's just
like sitting on
watching
a
his feet
log,
with TV.
growing his
Yeah,
beard out over the years of just being in thought.
right, right.
Yeah.
Well, I might go into the questions. I've been gathering them from the chat. So if you do have any questions, please do tag me, or I might not see them. If I don't ask one, just let me know at the end. And but do tag me so I can see them, because I'm kind of focused on Grayson and chat at the same time. But the first question's from Big Fang Flying Wayne, BTF Wayne. The most important question is, who won, Drake or Kendrick?
Kendrick, easy. I mean,
Um,
I gotta say on this, I'm really not a Drake fan. Like I went into it already disliking Drake, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised at, like, it's not like he did a horrible job. Like his songs that he was coming out with did kind of impress me, but they just like were several tiers down from what Kendrick was doing. I mean, I don't think it can be argued by anybody that Drake won. So
Okay. Well, I don't really listen to rap, so I don't really have a dog in the race on this one. But Drake used to be on Degrassi, so I'll just, I think that says whether he won or lost really depends on your opinion of Drake on Degrassi. I think he was in a wheelchair in Degrassi as well, and I only know that because of my wife. So
yeah, no,
I don't, I
he was
don't
a
like.
shooting victim in the show.
Well, Drake certainly didn't come from the hood kind of thing.
No.
Like, I mean, it's yeah, it kind of is like he's not a gangster, but he plays one on TV, basically.
And that actually was one thing that really has been annoying me with Drake. It feels like he's been leaning into that a lot more recently, like where he's been doing songs where he's like slaughter gang, murder gang, and I'm like, you
Dude,
grew up like in like at least a top 5% income household, if not top
right, right,
1%. Like you were not at all. Boy, what are you talking about? Slaughter gang,
yeah,
like and like yeah, Kendrick called him out on it perfectly, like talking about all the collaborations that he's done just to make him look like he's part of like
hmm,
nerd culture. And it's like, yeah, I mean, he got completely blown out in that. I mean, it's not even close.
fair enough. Iron Charioteer asks, "How did you get so smart, Grayson?"
Reading, being curious. I'm probably like at any given time, I probably have like 60 tabs open of like random rabbit holes for like all kinds of different subjects that I think it's really just having curiosity about like a very large range of subject material and then spending your time learning. Like learning is probably one of my favorite hobbies to do. Like if I don't learn something new in a day, it kind of feels a little bit wasted. So always just continuously reading new things and trying to learn new things about a wide variety of fields that interest me. So I guess to answer the all question, I think it all kind of stems back to having a very wide ranging curiosity.
Hmm. And he's also asking, what interests do you have?
Well, like I said, learning is a big one, but I also am very interested in like nature, the environment. Like, I go on a lot of like I spend a lot of time in forests and in creeks and nature. I think that I don't know what would happen to my mental health if I was no, if like at least like once every 2 weeks or something, I wasn't going out and like doing a
So
hike or
hiking and yeah,
yeah,
gotcha.
or just like even if I'm just like sitting in the woods reading a book. Yeah, I love reading and writing. I've actually like written an entire like fiction book. Um, I love
Ever published it?
no, just I just
Okay.
wrote it for fun, but um, yeah, yeah, it was. I love writing, creative output. I also love dancing, music. I go to a lot of music festivals, like music shows. Uh, I enjoy dancing. It feels really good to do. Exercise in general, going to the gym. Yeah, those are generally my hobbies. I also love drawing, art, like doing artwork. Um, yeah, I've got sort of a lot of different hobbies, I guess.
Yeah, and I can answer that as well. So how would I get so smart? I think smart is like, so if you're talking about intelligence, it's very poorly understood. And so I will have a lot of things that interest me that I know a lot about, but things that don't, I know nothing about. So I don't, I think that intelligence is really it's really poorly defined, and we kind of define it as an ability to understand concepts, like understand them quickly or
Or
sufficiently.
problem solve.
Problem solve, right? So I kind of I think that sort of my background, I've had to do a lot of problem solving, and I enjoy puzzles and things like that. So that leads into what my interests are. I do enjoy puzzles, I enjoy crosswords, I enjoy reading, especially fantasy novels. I play a lot of video games. I love video games, and all of video games are is problem solving, essentially, or most of them. What it is problem solving.
Mark,
So I enjoy all that stuff.
I've got a
Well,
question.
what's your question? Oh, I'm sorry. You have to tag me in the chat if you want me to see it. But no, I'm joking. Go for it. Go for it.
What are your favorite fantasy novel series?
I think that Brandon Sanderson's Mist is it Mist Walker Mist something
Mistborn.
Mistborn series was absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. That's one of my favorites. I love him. But Lord of the Rings, of course, just amazing. Um, what else did I like? There's an Australian author that I liked, Sarah something. I can't remember her full name, but yeah, just
Have,
yeah, those are probably my favorites.
have you read The Name of the Wind, like the King Killer Chronicle series
Yes, I believe so. I think I have.
by Patrick Rothfuss?
Is that? No, I definitely haven't read that. Is that the King's Assassin series?
No, but that is my favorite fantasy series.
Okay.
So if you ever get the opportunity to read The Name of the Wind, I highly recommend checking it out. You know, whenever you're reading something
Mhm.
and you like have to go back and reread the sentence because you're just like, wow, that was such an amazing sentence. And you have to reread it just because it really hits you. I think that feeling happens to me more often reading like The Name of the Wind than any other fantasy book.
Mhm.
So I
Oh,
would recommend.
BTF1, you're right. Discworld can't be beat. Yeah, no, Discworld is actually my favorite series. But I'd kind of put that under comedy and not fantasy. I mean, I suppose it
It's
is. It
fantasy
qualifies.
for
It
sure.
is. It is fantasy. Yeah, but I don't know. That has a special place because it's also, it's not fantasy like Lord of the Rings. It's
Yeah.
definitely comedy. But Terry Pratchett is probably my
Well,
favorite
hey,
author.
I mean, I would still consider The Hitchhiker's Guide to be science fiction, and it's like it's
Mm.
hilarious. I mean, I'm laughing
Yeah,
out
yeah,
loud.
absolutely.
So
Um, and something that I got to say, one of my favorite authors is actually William Gibson, who wrote. It's more science fiction. It's called Cyberpunk,
mhm,
but he wrote a book called Neuromancer,
yes,
which he coined the term cyberspace. He made up
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
term, and it sort of applies now. He is the patron saint of cyberpunk and the internet.
yes,
Um, I think that Neuromancer was described as like this book where all of the main characters are flawed and are on drugs. The police, whenever they show up, they're instantly killed. and the bad guy gets exactly what he wants and gets everything at the end. And it is the best description of the book ever. William Gibson actually said that is the best description of this book that has ever been made. Fantastic book. Neuromancer, Count Zero, Mona Lisa Overdrive. If you have not read them, they are freaking amazing. Like, just amazing books.
I think I've read about the first 50 to 100 pages of Neuromancer. I should go back and make a point of finishing it, though.
Yeah, my copy of Neuromancer is actually falling apart. I've read it that many times. It's just,
Hey,
I would probably...
So is my copy of... Oh, I think it's in a different room. But so is my copy of The Name of the Wind. It's like
okay, yeah,
missing. It's like totally just wrecked.
Yeah. No, that's fair. But yeah, there's so much of that. But yeah, absolutely. What's your favorite video game?
It's probably Elden Ring, honestly. I've just started playing it a couple months ago, a couple weeks ago, really. Like, I literally don't really play many video games. Like, I was super into Elden Ring when it came out, but I did not have a PlayStation, so I couldn't actually play it. I just watched a bunch of videos about it and got really into videos about it. And then as the DLC was coming out, and I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna buy an Elden Ring machine. I mean a PS5. And so yeah, like, literally my PlayStation is literally just an Elden Ring machine. I don't play any other games other than that. I was like, for most of my life, I've been really into the Zelda franchise and like Zelda games. But yeah, honestly, playing Elden Ring, I think I'm like more into that. I think it's probably my favorite. Maybe that's a recency bias slipping in. Like, Ocarina of Time might have been my favorite, like, last year, if you had asked me that question. But yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's Elden Ring. I'm super excited for the DLC. I've been watching some of your Elden Ring gameplay.
Oh, I've been suffering. Yeah, no, I've been really suffering.
I love it. I don't know. So that's how. But I'm not. I really don't play that many video games. Like, Elden Ring is probably the first video game I've played in like. Well, no, I play the new Zelda games, but other than that, I don't play any other games, and I haven't really played games other than the Zelda games for like 10 years or something. So
yeah, I had sort of a big break for them, but then I went, well, I mean, it's good fun, but I think that was interesting. Okay. So Jeff C asked, do you debate politics or geopolitics, Grayson?
I'm not opposed to it. I think I've only got like one political debate on my channel, and that was when I debated Snake Was Right on, does libertarianism make any sense at all? Because I don't think it does. And so yeah, I've debated libertarianism before, but I mean, especially now as we're kind of in the 2024 election swing, I'm not opposed to doing like a 2024 debate, Trump v. Biden. But yeah, I mean, I definitely like, I have political convictions. Like, I would largely identify myself on the left, but I don't have like really firmly held like prescriptions politically. Like, I don't have like, this is exactly what I think should be done. This is what I think is the best policy. I have things that I think are terrible policies, but I don't have like some like, this is the policy that I think is the best. So that's maybe why. Yeah, I vote. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
But I don't I vote against things more than voting for things. So I think that maybe that could have to do with it, because like, I really enjoyed the science debates because you can do the research and see what the evidence shows. With politics, it's much more difficult to find what the right stance is. I think, but I approach things with an open mind. Like, I'm always opening to change my mind on politics, and I have had my mind changed on politics before. But yeah, I mean, I know what I don't like.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I just, I think that, we really have to rely on sociology and statistics and things like that, which is, like, so you're talking about hard sciences like, if this chemical reaction happens, that is what will happen. So those hard sciences as opposed to the soft sciences, like, well, statistically, this is, what 58% of people experience. And it's like, well, that's a harder thing to base a decision on rather than, hey, I'll mix this up and get this reaction kind of thing. So I totally understand it. But I don't know if I do much of social policy because unfortunately, for whatever reason, it seems like the debate sphere is filled with American social disagreements, and I don't, I don't come from America, so I don't know if I can actually sufficiently argue that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to it, but I don't really get into it that much either. Do you have any siblings, and what was your upbringing like? And you can come in late anytime, Iron Charioteer. That's no problem at all.
Yeah, so I'm an only child. I don't know if sometimes I say that and people are like, "Yeah, that makes sense," and I don't know what that fully means, but whatever that means, apparently people say it makes sense that I'm an only child. No, I don't have any siblings. My upbringing was pretty cool, I think. Like we touched on before, I did not have a religious upbringing. Like my
Mhm.
father is like a, you might say, like a militant atheist. Like he's very like anti-religion.
Right.
Um,
So anti-theist, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, anti-theist. Very much like that's stupid or whatever. But like he never really talked about it that much. Like, yeah, I would have to ask him what his opinion was on something. He would not like tell me what to think. Um,
Mhm.
and my mom is more sort of, spiritual, new agey or whatever. But again, like she
Yep.
doesn't tell me what to think. She might say like, "Oh, Grayson, I think that you're an old soul and that you've been reincarnated for a long time." And like, but she would just say that's what she thinks. She would never say that that's what I am.
Yes.
And so I
Yes.
would like just not agree with it. But um, so that none of them really told me what to think.
Mhm.
And so I really didn't know much about religion all growing up until fifth grade. Some kid in my class pushed me up against a locker and was like, "You're an atheist, aren't you?" And I was like,
Ooh.
I don't know what that is." And he's like,
Mhm.
"That means that you believe in science instead of God." And then I was like, "Oh, well, then yeah, okay, I guess I am one of those." And then he tried to punch me. Like, so that
Yeah.
was my first introduction. And then
It's giving you that Christian love, just
yes,
giving you the love via knuckles, which
yeah.
is, yeah, just
And so
hilarious. Yeah.
basically the whole time I was growing up when I was a kid, because we still did like Christmas and Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy and stuff. But like, I think it was in first grade or something. I was like, "Mom, Santa Claus isn't real, right?" And she's like, wait, why are you saying that? Did somebody tell you something?" And I'm like, "Well, like reindeer don't have wings. They're not aerodynamic enough to fly." And that was my
Mm.
rationale as a first grader for why Santa Claus can't be real. And she's like, "Well, yes." And I was like, "And the Tooth Fairy too?" And she's like, "And the Tooth Fairy too." And so it was first grade when I kind of came to that realization. And then I sort of
Nice.
assumed that this God thing was the same. I thought it was just something that the adults were telling the kids, like Santa Claus, and
Well,
actually
you're
I
not
didn't
wrong.
I didn't actually understand that the adults were believing in this until like a long ways away. It wasn't until like I don't even remember the exact instance, but I like the first time, like I realized adults actually take this stuff seriously. Like this is not just something that they're telling the kids. Like they actually believe this. I was shocked. Um,
Mhm.
and so yeah, my upbringing was definitely not religious in nature. I was always into science though, and learning about how the world worked. Like Bill Nye the Science Guy, The Magic School Bus. Like those were like my favorite shows. Um, and yeah, spending a lot of time in nature. My dad was an avid falconer, so we always had a hawk, like all growing up, and we would go hunting with the hawk. And so like every week, we would go out with the hawk, go out to the creek or to the forest. I spent like a lot of time outdoors, like in the creek. I was really into hunting for fossils, really into all kinds of critters, and
Mhm.
trying to make little survival encampments. And I probably spent most of my time like outdoors in nature, which, you
Nice.
know, I grew up in Texas in a sort of suburban environment, but
I'm sorry.
there are still enough creeks and everything to where I could always get out into nature and, you know, find cool animals and rocks and things. So that was what
Did
my
you grow up in, was it Austin that you grew up in? I've heard that Austin is like a bastion of sanity. Sorry?
Dallas, yeah, not Austin.
Dallas. No, okay.
I will
So
say,
yeah.
if you are going to live in Texas or visit Texas, Austin is definitely the place to go. It's
Mm,
definitely that's the coolest city in Texas. Um, Dallas is a lot less like artistic or like nature inclined. It's a lot more kind of like finance and oil and cattle and religion and
yeah.
football. That's sort of the cultural
And
milieu.
guns.
And guns, yes. That's the cultural
How could you
milieu.
forget that one? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, we always had guns growing up. That was pretty common. I mean, I think I shot my first bullseye when I was like 4. So,
All right. And Iron Charioteer expects great things from you, but it's no like seriously, don't listen to that. Like I've had to come to the realization that in doing what we're doing, you just all you can do is your best. Like people will expect all kinds of things, but all you can do is the best that you can do. And if there was anything better you could do, you'd be doing it. So I think that you know we you know, there's only so much we can do. There's, you know, we are small people in the world. We can only change so much. We can only do so much, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But I love your channel, Grayson. I loved your video on Amyloid World. It was fantastic. Really easily explained, and you know, I always love it when I see a channel doing tentative stuff instead of, you know, the Christians. Oh, this is definitely how the world was created by God. You know, I love that people can say, hey, we don't know this for sure. This is one hypothesis, but it's worth investigating is the thing. Um, I don't know. I kind of like panspermia as a thing, like, you know, it happening in space with the rotation of an asteroid providing the heating and cooling. But you know, I have no reason to really think that except that it sounds cool. That's all. You know, that's my entire basis for the origin of life is, well, that sounds cool if it happened on an asteroid and fell to Earth. That sounds awesome.
well, I would say that there is, you know, you're not completely without an evidentiary basis in that, like, the majority of complex carbon molecules in the universe are not on
Mm.
planets. It's in space.
Yes, yeah.
So you actually have a lot of really interesting photochemistry that goes on in like clumps of ice
Mm.
and dust where it's exposed to ultraviolet radiation from a star, and it excites a lot of really interesting chemistry that can go on these ice and dust mediums, and it can create some really complex organic chemistry. And so you can get a lot of really complex interactions happening out in space. So it's not
Mm.
outside of the realm of possibility.
Right.
So
But we don't have really, like, it's one of those hypotheses where we don't have any evidence to suggest that is the case. It's so tentative at the moment, and that's okay. That's fine. I want to believe in space life because that sounds cool to me.
I mean, it
But
definitely does sound cool, but yeah, there was that famous meteorite. I guess it's from Mars, not from like the asteroid belt or whatever. But
right.
there was a famous meteorite, I think, in the 90s and early 2000s, where it looked like it could have contained some sort of unicellular fossil. And I think it's largely fallen by the wayside because I think some scientists showed that you could um, get a similar looking pattern through a completely non biological mechanism.
Mm,
Um,
yep.
but that still definitely captured my imagination as a kid. Was reading up on that meteorite and thinking about um, just what kinds of crazy forms that life could adapt to, like not even
Yep.
on the planet, but like just in space in general. Um,
Probably crabs. probably crabs.
It'll probably be crabs. You know,
Yeah.
Mark, I don't know if I've shared this with you, but I recently, just a couple months ago, I came across a paper that was showing, and I think you would like this being with your computer science background.
Mhm.
This paper was showing that you could create a basic logic gate entirely out of crabs. And
Nice.
and
Yeah.
like it takes like 64 crabs or something to have like a basic like if then logic gate.
Mhm.
But like just based on like deterministic behavior that crabs do given a certain stimulus, you could kind of create a certain logic gate out of that. And somebody did the calculations and found that it would take that you could run Doom off of 16 billion crabs.
Nice.
I
Nice.
love that. It's one of my favorite new papers I found.
Yeah, I mean, you can build logic gates out of just about anything. Like logic gates are just a physical representation of our sort of logical constructs kind of thing. Anyway, that's enough for another story. But yeah, I do apologize. I've kept you way over time. It was supposed to be an hour and a half. We've got every time
Well,
I
I
have
don't think
something
we agreed
really
on
interesting.
a time, so I'm totally fine.
Well, I try not to go too long. It's supposed to be like a nice encapsulation of an hour and a half, but we've definitely gone way over, and that's okay. That's totally cool. But thank you so much for coming on, Grayson. It's been a blast.
Yeah,
And someone was asking whether we plan on doing debates together. I'd love to do a debate with you.
absolutely.
Absolutely. That would be fantastic. As I said, if it can be evolution or a biogenesis, so you can carry my ass, that would be fantastic as well. Although, philosophy, I'd probably carry yours. I probably know a little bit more, but that's
Yeah.
okay. That's all right.
I'm really
Yeah,
trying to do another Big Bang debate as well. I've been really wanting to do one of those.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
'Cause I
Yeah,
just
no,
I
we'll
just audited a course. It was like a graduate level course in cosmology at my local university, and I had a
nice.
ton of fun in that course. So it'd be fun
Mhm.
to put some of that learning to use and do another Big Bang debate, which I've done before, but I really miss. So
And he said, could join him for an episode of Science News. Look, I'd love to. I'd love to. It's just I'm not a scientist myself. Like I am, like technically, I do in engineering. It's a subsection of engineering. So I'm not a actual scientist. I don't ever claim to be. So my field is network and systems. So internetworked computers, which is not, you know, so the stuff that people do from my field are things like server maintenance, network maintenance, like NOC, so operations center work, just stuff like that, so like cybersecurity for server networks, things like that, routing systems, and I'm not a scientist. Like when you said so this is the thing. Computer science is not me. That's people doing theoretical stuff in computers.
yeah.
That's not what I do. So I don't. That's not my field. I have no idea.
Well,
So
are you like a network engineer or?
yeah, kind of. That would be the closest thing. But sort
Okay.
of network maintenance is basically half of that, and security's
And
like
I saw somebody in the comments was asking, was telling me that I need to get an intro for my videos. I've literally had an intro planned from like before I even put out my first video, and like I even
mm,
created the sound for it, like the audio, and I've had that, and I think I need to hire an animator or something. Like they point to Gutsit Gibbon, and she makes her own animations, which I'm just
yeah.
so impressed by. Like her animations and her intro is awesome. I like
She
I
did that video recently of how to draw the Gutsick Gibbon. I loved it. I don't know where I would use that knowledge, but I absolutely loved it that she's
yeah.
like, yeah, here's how I draw it. This is
The
awesome.
vision for my intro that I thought out, and I made the little sound here. You know the song like "Thus Sprach Zarathustra" that was used in like 2001: A Space Odyssey, like dun
Yes, yeah, yeah.
dun dun dun. Like so, I had that, and like it was gonna be like the evolution, like like from single cells, like really fast, all the way through like humans, and then it was going to start devolving into a creationist, and then it was just going to get like
Wow.
and then the word based was just going to come from the sky and just splatter them and just go like
Oh God.
based theory.
Talk
And
about shots
and then
fired.
and then the
Wow.
monkey from earlier was gonna point and laugh. It was definitely a provocative intro, and I literally have
Yeah.
I wish I could play the audio because I did make the audio where you literally hear, like, the 2001 theme, which is public domain now, by the way, and then you hear
Yes.
splat, and then the monkey go, "Ha ha!" Like, I had the whole thing, I made the whole
Uh,
audio.
like the Simpsons kid. What's his
Yes,
name? Nelson going,
yes,
ha ha.
yes, but it
Yeah.
was like a little laughing monkey. I literally made the audio for that, so I do need to hire an animator, so if you know anybody that is really good at animations, definitely send them my way.
So absolutely, and I will get Critical Base Theory, fantastic channel. Do go and subscribe. I'm just grabbing it right now for you. And if you do want to see a creationist intro for a creationist get murdered, leave comments and on Grayson's channel. Just ask for it. I'm sure he can provide. But thank you so much for joining us today, Grayson. What have you got going on? What's in the future for you?
So yeah, I've been just I think in the last month or month and a half, I've started doing weekly
Mm.
streams. I think
Yep.
unfortunately I picked a night where you're also streaming. I
Hmm.
think mine maybe
That's
start
a
a little bit before yours. Mine start like
yeah.
7:30 Central Time. And I typically will talk about the news in science that week, what happened new in
Mhm.
science, and then I open it up for call-in debates or for anyone that's got a question or something they want to talk about to call in. And
Yeah.
that's been a ton of fun. I've been really enjoying those. And then I've got I'm going to be putting out a few different science videos. One about the evolutionary origins of religion. One about the
Mhm.
single best piece of evidence for the Big Bang and dark matter,
Yep.
dark energy, all of cosmology, called the CMB power spectrum. Really excited for that one. And then I've also got a video on quantum entanglement and how it's used in
Ooh.
cosmology. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that'd be
yeah.
cool.
So those
Yeah,
are the science videos that I've got coming down the pipeline. Then I think I've got a debate. I need to get it scheduled, but Nathan, the flat earther Nathan, not
which one?
the
Lumen?
nicer one,
Nathan
Lumen.
Lumen?
Yeah,
Yeah,
pitcher.
yeah, yeah, Lumen. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to be having
He's
a
a nice
discussion
guy.
with him. I'm going to try
Yep.
to change his mind. So we'll see how that goes.
Okay, because you've done stuff with him on your channel before, like
I have
taking
not.
him
I
through
haven't talked
certain.
to Nathan
You
before.
haven't.
No,
Somebody has. Who did that? Somebody
Leo did.
definitely. It was Leo, was it? Okay,
Leo
yeah. Because
talked to him on the channel, and
I
I've talked to him on the phone before,
uh-huh.
but I haven't done it in a public setting. And
Yep.
yeah, if there's any flat earther that can change their mind, I feel like he's closer than most. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to show him the evidence. But you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So we're
Oh,
gonna see.
look. I've had a video on Nathan that was called "Saving Nathan," and the thumbnail is like people dragging a soldier, that's wounded. Like I really feel like we need to rescue that
Yeah.
man. He's too nice to be,
Well,
slowly
it's literally
toxified.
ruining his life. Like, he was trying to become a doctor and fulfill his dreams, and he dropped out because he
Yeah,
didn't want to learn about evolution. Like,
yeah,
it's literally getting in the way of his dreams and goals in life. It's like, and he's like, "You think I want to think I'm a flat earther and be isolated from my friends and family?" I'm like, "Dude, like,
yeah. It's
I
so
mean,
sad.
it's like
Mm,
literally this is ruining your life, and it's like it's a position that makes no sense.
yeah,
Come on, yeah. So I think you know if he could just look at the evidence without he ties everything up. He literally said to me, if
it's
the
his
earth,
religion.
yeah, he said if the
Yeah,
earth is not flat, then God doesn't exist. He literally said that as an if then statement,
that
and
doesn't follow.
it's like, well, because he thinks that the God of the Bible very clearly describes the earth as flat and that the Bible has to be infallible. And if it's not, then God doesn't exist. And so that's his reasoning for that. But he has it so tied up, like to where, like, if he accepts that the earth is not flat, then suddenly everything about his identity and his worldview and his beliefs has to change. And he has so much writing on this belief that it's like, it's just so tied up into everything about his
Yeah.
conception of reality.
But you know what will change? Almost nothing. like it really the a person is not their religious belief. A person is not their belief about what shape the earth is. You know, a person has sort of attributes and beliefs, and you know how they treat other people. That doesn't change. You know, like people that stop being Christians, they don't suddenly change into a monster as soon as they become an atheist.
Yeah.
You know, or the vice versa. An atheist can, you know, start being a Christian. They don't suddenly turn into a monster. So I don't think that, you know, even though he's put a lot of his identity on it, I don't think it will change a lot for him.
And I think like he would probably be surprised by how robust his beliefs are. I mean, most people, you know, they're still going to maintain their belief in God, like even if they are saying, "Oh well, God was just directing evolution or the Big Bang." Like they can always change subtle things about their worldview to maintain the things that are most important to them. So I don't think that it'll ultimately change, but he just has built this up in his mind of believing that he has to change everything about his worldview and himself and his identity if the earth isn't flat. And he just built this false this false if then kind of setup that it's just getting past that is the huge roadblock in that case. So anyways, I think it'll be an interesting conversation. I'm going to try to use evidence that, because, you know, a lot of flat earthers fall back into conspiracy. Like if you point them at something like a scientific evidence that was done at CERN or at LIGO, the gravitational wave detector, they'll say, "Oh, well, it's just a bunch of scientists faking the data." So I'm going to try to present him data that cannot be faked, data that anyone can verify that shows that the earth cannot be flat. So we'll see if that works, because he can't just say that the data is a big conspiracy, because, you know, it cannot be faked. There's a great paper on specifically flight times and calculating the radius of the earth through flight times. That's publicly available information on flight times. And they show that there are two kinds of ways of calculating distances based on flight times. One of them is for flat earth. One of them is for an earth of any curvature or radius at all. And any curvature or radius fits the earth, the data better. Like the data physically cannot be true for a flat earth. That it just cannot, you can't make it happen. So flight times pretty definitively show the earth cannot be flat.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you so much for coming on, Grayson. That I really look forward to all of that. That's going to be awesome. And I think there's been a few people calling for us to do a debate together, so we're going to have to do that now, because I'm just a sucker for whatever my chat tells me.
We have to. And Mark, I'm sorry to but there's one thing I forgot. I'm going on a dinosaur fossil hunting expedition.
With Doc? Yeah, with Doc Dino. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
I'm able to mention that. That's like literally happening in like 1 month. Like we're gonna be there in like June, like the middle of June.
Amazing.
So I'm so excited for that. We're gonna be driving to Wyoming. We're gonna be looking for a juvenile sauropod specimen. And I mean, it's literally a childhood dream of mine to go and dig up a dinosaur. So hopefully we find one. I've got my fingers crossed. It would literally like make my entire life. So yeah, very, very much looking forward to that. And I will make a video about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You better. I really want to see what goes down on the other side of the world. But yeah, if ever you get to WA, there is some amazing dinosaur-like sites over here, some incredible stuff, because it is the oldest continent in the world, if you didn't know that.
Yes. And Mark, by the way, I've literally, like, as a kid, I was obsessed with Australia. I don't think I've seen that before, but like I played the game Ty the Tasmanian Tiger on GameCube. And after playing that game, I became completely obsessed with Australia for like years. Like I bought all like as many books as I could on Australia. I like learned all the animals and was like, I was super obsessed. I wanted to go and live in the outback. It was
you're not going to see a Tasmanian tiger. I'm sorry, Grayson.
I know.
Thylacine is definitely
just this week on Twitter. It's probably a hoax, but like little like shaky cam footage and pictures of a supposed Tasmanian tiger sighting has been throughout Twitter this last week. So I have hope in my heart, Mark.
Okay, well, I'd probably have skepticism in your brain at the same time.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably.
Anyway,
but
yeah. Thank
I
you
want
so
to
much,
believe,
Grayson.
Mark. I want to believe.
Don't we all? Don't we all? But the Tasmanian tiger is probably gone the way of the dodo, literally. But thank you so much, Grayson. I really appreciate it. Yeah, do go and subscribe to Grayson. It's a fantastic channel. Lots of science, lots of debate, lots of just being awesome over there. Don't always remember to be kind to yourself, be kind to each other, and have a fantastic day, everyone. Oh, don't forget to like and subscribe too. That really helps me out. I'm sitting here plugging Grayson and just ignoring myself as per usual.
Yeah.
But take care, everybody. And
2,000 subscribers, guys. If you guys are not
yeah,
subscribed, what are you even doing? Get this man.
I will have a 2K celebration, absolutely. Because the last one was 1.5, I think, and that was a while ago. So we definitely need to have a celebration again for 2K. But thank you so much, everybody, and take care.